Hey, so we all saw the Season 2 finale of The Rehearsal, right? Wild stuff. Not sure I ever want to fly again. But if you lived in the UK, you probably saw that the season dropped a whole month after it did in the US because HBO is tangled up with Sky here. That's where this video's sponsor comes in, Private Internet Access. It's a VPN, an app that hides your IP address, safeguards your internet connection, and shields your digital life from the eyes of those that are looking to exploit your private information. Yeah, you say, I know what a VPN is. Basically every YouTube video talks about them, and to that I say, don't talk over me while I'm paying the bills. What makes Private Internet Access stand out is that they put the cellophane where their mouth is by being the world's most transparent VPN provider, with over 30 million downloads. They never record or store user data, and their no-logs policy has been proven multiple times in court and by a third-party audit from Deloitte. Private Internet Access is available for all platforms, and you can use just one subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices at the same time. There's no device limit stuck behind paywalls. You can install it on anything, anywhere in the world. It works with all major streaming services, so if you were like me and frustrated that The Rehearsal wasn't airing in the UK, you could use it to catch up before you get spoiled. By using my link, you can grab an 83% discount on a 2-year plan, plus 4 months completely free. That's just $2.03 a month, with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thanks again to Private Internet Access, and on with the video. 1, 2, 3. This is a game called Look Outside. It's an excellent minimalist horror game released in 2025, set in a warped apartment building. A strange event turns anyone who looks outside into a grotesque monster. Your neighbors have transformed into something cosmic, and the few who've survived are slowly going mad. What's out there? What do people see when they look out the window? Well, if I was a character and look outside, I would see Resident Evil 3 Remake. Whoa, steady on Monty, that's a bit strong, isn't it? You mutter as you hit the subscribe button, and to that I say, yes, it is. It's a bit of playful hyperbole to open the video and recommend Look Outside to you, leave me alone. But it's hyperbole grounded in sincerity. Resident Evil 3 Remake is a tepid horror game, a poor remake, a disappointing sequel to Resident Evil 2, and most importantly of all, it completely mishandles its central concept and themes with tonal whiplash so maddening that it makes me see stars. You don't need to compare it to what came before to see that, but doing so shines a light on how there was not one but two blueprints for an excellent remake here that Capcom swerved around. The 1999 original and S.D. Perry's novelization. When it comes to the OG, we got a groundbreaking, unique horror game that solidified key parts of Resident Evil's iconography. The Nemesis, ammo crafting, the Clocktower, the depth of Umbrella's hold on Raccoon City. When it comes to S.D. Perry's book, we get emotional gravitas, a strengthening of the villain Nikolai Genevieve, and an honest look at the psychology of Jill Valentine. Just like with my other Resident Evil videos, I will be referencing both as we work through the streets of Raccoon City, because it helps illustrate just how lackluster the remake is, and what it could have been. In the dream, Jill didn't run fast enough. It was the same dream she'd suffered every few days since the mission that had nearly killed them all that terrible, endless night in July. Back when she was still stupid enough to think that people would believe their story. She lay still for a moment, breathing deeply, moving her hand away from the loaded Beretta under her pillow. It had become a reflex, and one that she wasn't sorry to have developed. Useless against nightmares though, she muttered. There's an argument to be made that comparing the remake to the original is unfair. Just because a remake isn't faithful doesn't mean it's not brilliant in its own right. And besides, it's not a remake, some say. It's a reimagining. First off, tell that to Capcom's advertising, and second, when it comes to quality, I don't think that argument holds water. Aside from its capital G graphics, Resident Evil 3 Reimagined is a less interesting, less effective, and less powerful piece of art than the thing it's reimagining. It's not just different, it's not as good at making the player feel what it wants us to feel. Arguably, what Capcom gave us in 2020 should have been pitched as a DLC or expansion for Resident Evil 2. The claim goes that the sting of disappointment would have hurt less if it was pitched as a smaller, contained $30 experience. I don't necessarily agree with that. Resident Evil 3 deserved a great, fully priced, fully funded remake because the original game is pretty damn great, and it was pieced together on a shoestring budget.
This game was supposed to be a spin-off, so I adhered to that framework during development. I was not expecting it to become 3 at all.
Shinji Mikami told Itchy Tasty. He didn't work on the original Resident Evil 3, but he appointed the game's director Kazuhiro Aoyama and oversaw it as a producer.
Aoyama's game was supposed to target underground hardcore fans of Resident Evil who didn't care if the game was weird or quirky.
Conceived as Resident Evil 1.9, the game was supposed to satiate fans while Hideki Kamiya worked on what came next. But as time went on, the team were given a new mandate: expand the game as much as possible. It's now a mainline entry. The Raccoon City Park and the Dead Factory are a result of that mandate. The game was supposed to end much earlier. To this day, Aoyama still isn't happy with the final product, despite it being so beloved by fans.
I really wish I could have done more,
he told Alex O'Neill. Considering that development history, it's interesting that Resident Evil 3 Remake simultaneously mirrors the creation of the 1999 game while deviating in the only way that matters. Just like the original, it released 1 year after Resi 2. Just like the original, it had a smaller budget and smaller development team. Just like the original, it released to satiate fans while we waited for the next big thing in Resident Evil 8. That's a lot of words to sum up something definitive. Resident Evil 3 Remake might have been developed over 3 years, but it was rushed, and it shows. Yet, that rushing doesn't excuse the weak scares, the lack of tension, and a story that starts to take Jill Valentine seriously before simply forgetting to do that. So, grab your rocket launcher or your railgun and join me as we say goodbye to Raccoon City. This is a commentary and critique of Resident Evil 3. Remember this moment?
Jesus Christ!
You're marching along, minding your own business, feeling more familiar and comfortable with the Raccoon City police station. You've just solved a puzzle, unlocked a route, and then, boom. Out of nowhere comes Mr. X, ripping the crashed helicopter from the wall and tossing it aside with such insurmountable strength that it immediately screams threat. All of it done without warning, without announcement, without a cutscene, and better yet, without any form of acute direction given to the player about what happens next. Do you fight this monster, or do you run? Is this a boss fight? What do I do? The appearance of Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 completely changed the way you see the game world. You have spent hours dealing with this slow drip of tension, occasionally leaping into full-blown panic, so when he enters, the tone of the game is flipped upside down. Resi 2 makes you wait for it. Someone at Capcom saw the reception to Mr. X and said, damn, people will lose their minds when they see Nemesis. Chuck him in the first few minutes. No, wait, better yet, chuck him in the first few seconds.
Fucking hell. Gets worse every night.
We're going to get into the grit of Nemesis design later, but Resident Evil 3 has the worst opening of the mainline games and it whirls around his presence. Jill Valentine isn't sleeping. PTSD pounds at her every night, lost in nightmares and bleary, washed-out colours. A conspiracy board she's erected on her wall tells us that the soldier who beat the tyrant and blew up the Spencer mansion is struggling with her mental health. What do you do when the truth won't save you? She knows so much about Umbrella, and it's useless against them. 1999 opened with exploding glass as Jill and the player were cornered by zombies. We picked up with her in the midst of Raccoon City's downfall. It's a tense opening, but not necessarily action-packed, exploding windows be damned. On normal difficulty, you're still stuck with limited ammo, a handgun that has a laborious fire rate, and a claustrophobic alleyway to let the panic seep in. The stakes are raised in the first few seconds, but that quickly gives way to a steady, tense tread once she makes it to the warehouse and catches her breath. Remake's opening is, ironically, more similar to S.D. Perry's book, Jill gasping awake from a nightmare. Jill ran, and suddenly there was no heliport, no crumbling mansion, only a million trees, and the sounds. Her boots slapping the earth, the pulse of blood in her ears. The monster was silent behind her, a mute and terrible force, relentless and as inevitable as death. They were dead. Chris, Barry, Rebecca, even Brad. She knew it, everyone but her, and as she ran, she saw the tyrant's shadow stretch out in front of her, burying her own. The hiss of its monstrous talons sliced down, melting through her body, killing her. No! There, it's all about the T2 tyrant. Every night she relives that final horrifying confrontation on the Spencer Mansion's helipad, setting up a particular type of trauma for her to overcome when Nemesis appears. When the final page arrives, she's grappled with that PTSD. If she can kill the Nemesis, she can handle anything. Remake tries a different tact. The virus. In the dream, blood drips from her nose, and in the dim light she watches herself change and devolve into a rotting, grey husk. She's harboring a seated terror that the T-virus is incubating inside of her. It's a calm, ominous opener that lays a great foundation to be capitalized on later. In the grand conspiracy of Resident Evil's story, Jill suffers more than any other hero. Canonically, she was imprisoned by Wesker in the Spencer Mansion, hunted by Nemesis, infected with the T-virus, experimented on, and eventually brainwashed into being a mass murderer. So, her only solo game is ripe to explore who she is in the face of what she'll soon confront. This is awesome, but after we leave the apartment, the game drops Jill's trauma completely in favor of Super Cop, the railgun-toting, sewer-sliding, foul-mouthed badass. I like that sewer slide animation though. It's a neat attention to detail that separates her from Leon and Claire's rookie status. Jill's PTSD is a missed horror opportunity as well as a character opportunity. With rumors flying that Capcom are considering remaking Resident Evil 1 again as part of the 30th anniversary, we could have caught glimpses of the Spencer Mansion through playable flashbacks. It's something that SD Perry doubles down on in the book. She just decided to try climbing over one of the western blockades when she saw something that changed her mind. Something she'd fervently hoped to never see again. A hunter, like the ones in the estate, in the tunnels. A tightening in her chest. She held her breath, her stomach in knots. Remembering. Tiny light-colored eyes peering out at her from a flat reptilian skull. Tremendous high-pitched screeching. Feet tipped with thick, brutal claws. Everything reminds her of the mansion. Seeing creatures like the hunters or the crows, or yes, even Nemesis, triggers flashbacks and panic attacks. She's not a wreck. Her resolution remains. Her determination is carried into how she handles that anxiety. Upon seeing the hunter, she resolves to arm herself to the teeth. So, how does Remake Jill handle that horror?
It's my turn, bitch!
How is this fucker not dead yet?
Just no.
Bitch can't even swim.
You think I don't know how to fuck you up?
I love swearing, I love the endorphins that come from it, but I especially love when a wordsmith can take a swear or a curse and weave it into something poetic. The Honey Bunny line in Pulp Fiction. Liar, liars, pedantic, pontificating, pretentious bastard. Resident Evil 3 was not written by a wordsmith.
Hey! Fuckface!
I'm not sure if it was when Dr. Bard accused Carlos of sitting with his dick in his hand, or official UBCS documentation opened with "Come on, limp dicks," or when Jill called Nemesis a bitch, probably that one, that I realized Resi 3's dialogue was getting in the way of my attempts to find the fear. It didn't add levity. It didn't lean into that iconic Resident Evil cheese. It's just obnoxious, like trying to parse a stoner comedy from the early noughties. But the main issue was it kept distracting from the tension. Jill didn't seem to care, so why should I? When we finally take control of her, the apartment has evolved from the dream. In the fridge, we've got donuts, beer, milk, and beer. Bottles are everywhere, same goes for the pills. She hasn't been eating well, dishes pile up in her sink. It's a quiet, contemplative, depressing opening, setting a tone of slow, methodical insidiousness.
Hello?
Jill, are you okay?
Brad, is that you?
Listen, you gotta get out of there.
What are you talking about?
I don't have time to explain. You gotta get out of there right now.
Alright, let me grab my...
All of this goes out of the window when Nemesis bursts through the wall and attacks. Nuance, hints of dread, and a suffocating atmosphere are dashed in favor of frantic, overwhelming yelling about how scary it all is. Jump scares in game cutscenes never work. It doesn't matter how much a game's cinematography tries to adapt filmic techniques. The fact that a player goes from controlling and being responsible for the well-being of a character to watching them do their own thing without them means that it doesn't matter how big and scary Nemesis is, the fact he bursts through the wall during a moment of quiet doesn't jolt a player into action. Nemesis punches through the wall, then he steps into the light so the camera can focus on his new look, now with more trash bags. He kicks Jill for fun, and then after all of this, he waits another few moments for her to catch her breath, look up at him, raise her gun, and fire some shots. The fact that all of this takes place in a cutscene is indicative of what Resident Evil 3's greatest failure is with its horror. it announces the frights to you. Resi 1 announced its first zombie in a brief cutscene and then hid it from view with the fixed camera angles, so we got a confused, momentary spot of panic. Resi 2 did the same thing, locking you in a thin corridor and forcing a fight because you had to push past the zombie to grab a key. With Nemesis, you can sit back and have a cuppa or a smoke while he has a nice, long stretch. Looking good, Jill. Blasting off with Nemesis in the first 10 minutes means the game's got nowhere to go when it wants to return to a steady, tense tread. It wants to have its cake and eat it too. It tries to embrace classic survival horror during sections like the Spencer Memorial Hospital, but unnerving and creepy beats like the bug farm feel trite because before you even get a gun in your hand, you're strung along on an on-rails chase sequence. You control Jill for, at most, 10 seconds at a time before control is ripped away from you. Hope you liked that gameplay. Now it's back to everyone's favorite show, Shaky Cam with Nemi. Capcom littered the sequence with random yellow strands of police tape to guide us, like there's the possibility that the player could get lost from the one direction they're forced to go in. Being funneled down one path slices away the scare factor because I don't feel like I'm in control of Jill's destiny. Say goodbye to Resident Evil 1's brooding tension. Sayonara, Resident Evil 2's claustrophobic panic simulator. Resident Evil 3 Remake is here with a series of shorts for you to dance through. The insistence on chases and quick-time events and threat delivered via cutscene makes Nemesis a confusing bad guy. Why does he keep waiting for Jill to catch her breath before he attacks her? He's never been a monster that likes to play with his food. If he's this slow and lumbering, he's not half the threat Mr. X was. He's somehow characterized as more stupid than the previous game's tyrant. He constantly passes on opportunities to grind her bones to make his bread. Instead, he's wasting time chilling behind bookcases or letting the camera get a good look at him. There's one particular moment during all of this that compounds all of my issues. One really effective scare that is immediately gouged at by the action blockbuster. We see a ladder at the end of this fire escape, and a little interact icon flashes up saying that we can kick it down and climb to safety. Just as the interaction appears, boom. Nemesis crashes through the wall on our left and grabs Jill. In a vacuum, this is a gorgeous fake-out. Expectations are played with, but the climax of that fake-out is Nemi tossing Jill aside again after gazing lovingly into her eyes. He could have popped her skull right there with a quick squeeze of his hand, but nope, our big scary titan is feeling a little extra, so has decided to rip a part of the roof off and chase her with that instead. No wonder he doesn't actually kill any STARS members in this game. The first monster in a Resident Evil title matters. Nemesis matters, so his introduction really goddamn matters. The original game eked out a full chunk of exploration and a horde of zombies before we even heard about him, so the narrative tension poured and the mystery built. In the remake, it's just braying, yelling, and lengthy sequences where I don't need to do anything. Did you know that there's a whole custom animation Capcom took the time to make where Nemi kills us while chasing us through this fiery corridor? The only way you will ever see this is if you're trying to get Jill killed. All you do is push up on the analog stick here. You can't even weave her left and right. It feels like a gimmick, and when a monster feels like a gimmick, it becomes artificial, like a roller coaster ride rather than an immersive horror experience. Jill bursts out of the apartment building and has to steady herself in the alleyway. Just one interaction with Nemesis has already knocked her for 6. But I don't feel like that because I got to have 4 rest periods during a scripted chase scene.
You okay?
What was that thing?
Damned if I know. But right now it's got a hard-on for the only 2 stars left in town. You and me. I'm not sticking around. Just look around you. The longer we wait, the more screwed we are.
Brad Vickers has had a rough night. To the backdrop of burning people throwing themselves from windows, he distantly explains that Nemesis seems to be hunting down STARS members. But before he can say much more, he's bitten by a zombie. This happened in 1999 too, but there, Brad survives long enough to eventually fall to Nemesis and is a signal of our downtime. We find him catching his breath, and he introduces the steady menace of the tyrant as he jabbers incoherently about it. Here, he's discarded, just chum for the zombies, and an eventual explanation for how Marvin Branagh got bit. Bye, Brad. That's that bit done, I guess. Next bit. Even though Jill's escaped the apartment building, the game is still firmly hands-on. We haven't escaped the clutches of over-scripting, and she hasn't escaped the clutches of the tyrant. He attacks on a rooftop with another custom death animation unlocked by not pressing X. 2 confrontations with Nemesis, both wallowing in slow-motion shots and on-rails chases, both interrupt by QuickTime events.
Hey, easy, lady. I got you.
Who are you? What are you doing?
Name's Carlos, and I'm saving you. Come on, let's get you someplace safe.
Catharsis comes in the form of a rocket launcher, wielded by Carlos Oliveira, Umbrella mercenary, our hero, and the representative for a solid piece of narrative tension. He saves Jill, blasting Nemesis with that rocket launcher, and because of the weight that weapon has in the series, it's an effective button to end our opening on. Traditionally, they've always been the weapon to finish a Resi monster once and for all. Nemesis shrugging it off and later returning brings with it narrative weight. But it's not nearly enough to resolve a theme park ride. Where Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2's frights were all for the player, Resident Evil 3's opening is just for Jill. Thankfully, what follows works overtime to make up for it. No really, stick with me.
Carlos, you didn't even think to ask fine young lady her name? She is an elite operative of RPD, Special Tactics and Rescue Service. Her name is something Valentine.
It's Jill.
Mikhail Victor is a platoon leader for Umbrella's Biohazard Countermeasure Service, UBCS. Whether it's part of a PR stunt, a ruse to collect combat data, or simply an attempt to contain the mess they made, Umbrella have sent him, Carlos, and a horde of mercs into Raccoon City to rescue the civilians. They weren't told everything. They didn't expect the monsters. The plan is to get the subway working. One of the cars has a handful of scared civvies, and despite her initial distrust of Umbrella's operatives, Jill's savior complex kicks in. She agrees to help start the train. Time for some classic Resident Evil goodness. This initial section, Jill's mission to get the subway working, is the best part of the game, and it is unfortunately too short to leave a real impact in the grand scheme of things. The city streets dominated the first half of the original. We're here for 2/3 of the book. Uptown and downtown were substantial parts of the adventure because the feeling of Raccoon City falling into chaos was so important. Even when it pivoted to specific areas like the park, the RPD, or the Clocktower. Raccoon was dead, except for the brain-dead virus carriers that roamed the streets, looking for a meal. Between no sleep and a near-constant pump of adrenaline, the days had blurred together for Jill. It had been a slaughterhouse, the air fetid with a stink of shit and vomit, the walls decorated with smears of blood. 1999's Raccoon City emphasized rust, metal, and fire. Browns, greys, and blacks filled the screen, only interrupted by the bustling, bland colors of clothes on zombies or the splash of red as their heads exploded. Through that earlier environmental design, we saw that the city wasn't just dying, it was rotting and withering away as the virus spread. The city thrums, the city pounds, the city's got a hollow sound. Its guts have been scooped out and splattered on the walls. The remake has a different feel. Despite the streets being on fire, Raccoon City is gloriously cold. The plastic smile of corporate America manifests in Uncle Toy's dead-eyed stare. The coming storm that dominates Resident Evil 2 hasn't arrived yet, so the city's awash with a fiery glow that paints a city ready to blow. Neon dominates our time here, drawing our eye and painting an environment that's busy, chaotic. The design is defined by threats. Zombies burst out of cars or creep under debris. The sheer numbers that attack highlight the scale of the pandemic. There's only one place that's truly safe from The Walking Dead, a solitary save room with a musical theme that changes almost nothing about what worked in 1999. There's just one distinct change about Remake's save theme compared to the originals. Now, the bass has been turned down a little, so the sense of calm is the focus rather than the sense of dread. This version takes from the Biohazard Orchestral Concert, where Japan's Philharmonic Orchestra performed pieces of music from Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. It's beautiful, a lovely nod to the game's legacy and evolution, and best of all, Remake doesn't just pull from that concert once, but twice with its save themes. The underwhelming, short save room theme from Resident Evil 2 Remake has now also changed. When we eventually return to the RPD, the save theme is more full than it was before. injected into my veins. Listen to that brass. That praise is less contained to this opening section and is something to praise the whole game for, but tucking the save room into the back of the cafe makes it feel secure and contained. It's just a storage closet, but it's a storage closet that already feels like a powerful break from the anarchy outside. The fact the game gives us just one save room, however, flags how limited this section is compared to what came before. Throwing us into the commercial district means the horror is coated by a grim sense of humor. Cheerful locations like a donut shop and a toy shop let you imagine what Raccoon once looked like before the outbreak. And if the devil's in the details, he's having a lot of fun. Mega Man action figures, movie posters ripping off well-known films. Air Combat 1942 is just Top Gun, starring Tommy Clooney. Hey look, Dr. Light and Dr. Wily are leading a lecture on robots surpassing humanity. Wonder what that's about. We get to see the inside of someone's home, the subway station, a cafe, a pharmacy, the power plant, and it all interweaves so methodically that the district feels like a core central hub. We don't stay at street level the whole time. We hit rooftops, billboards, the upper floors of storage facilities. Backtracking is encouraged by not one but two items that unlock optional tools like the shotgun. The bolt cutters, a lockpick, a fire hose, all lead to us getting the power back on before Nemesis arrives to actually pursue us in gameplay. This was the game's demo, and it's the most substantial, most complex part of the entire game. And it also seems in a hurry to cram so much of the original story into our short time here, like the meeting with Nikolai. In 1999, we encountered him well after Jill's journey to the RPD. In the remake, he barrels into our first 30 minutes.
What the fuck?
He was infected.
He might have been infected.
Oh, stars, this soft. No wonder so many of you dead.
And what are you, UBCS? Killing your own people?
He would have turned. There's your sense of self-preservation.
Nikolai Zinoviev, UBCS soldier, isn't here to save anyone. He's got his own plans tonight. His introduction is as cold as it was in 1999. He kills his comrade, Murphy Seeker, in cold blood, despite protests that he's not infected. Nikolai and Jill sit on opposite ends of the survivor spectrum. Nikolai just sees monsters and threats. Jill sees victims. She targeted the darkest part of the shadow and waited sadly for it to step into view. She encouraged the feelings of pity and sorrow that she felt each time she had to put one of them down. Having to tell herself that each virus carrier was beyond hope allowed her to feel compassion for them. Even the shambling, decomposing mess that now swayed into view had once been a person. She refuses to let herself get emotional about it, but she believes that if she ever forgets the people of Raccoon were victims rather than monsters, she'd lose some essential element of her own humanity. Jill survives regardless of her empathy. Nikolai survives because he discards it. The knowledge that there are other survivors crossing our path changes how Raccoon City felt, both back in the day and in 2020. Distant gunfire tells us a battle is being fought, fading away the further into the game we go to show that the cops in the UBCS are losing. The original structure let Jill feel more isolated because she was, mathematically, alone for longer periods of time, and sections like the RPD let her feel particularly removed from the fires outside. More game, more puzzles, more zombies, more backtracking, and more city meant that she was more isolated, even when Carlos and Nikolai bumped into her. The essence of that is in this part of the remake, at least temporarily. When I played the demo, the backtracking, the unlocking of optional shops, the key hunts, all inspire confidence for what the game would be. This was a small part of the city, a single district that we had to methodically unlock. It's exciting to anticipate how large the city will grow as the game goes on. Perhaps once we douse the fire in this alleyway, we'll expand to see the gas station, City Hall, the park, all on the horizon, ready to be conquered the same way we conquered this district. That inspiration vanishes once we leave it, but it still makes this opening powerful on a first playthrough. And there's one small section that is a sincere horror standout.
Ugh. It smells like... Oh, I don't even want to think about it.
The power plant has turned into a horrifying hive, a bug nest full of new creatures that drain Deimos. We need to flick 4 switches, and when we do, we need to hold X as the perspective shifts, zooming out to frame Jill as small. Prey, not predator. We watch helplessly as they scuttle toward us. It's a maze of gore, rot, and shed skin, where the environment tricks us, turning us around. At one point, the only path through is a gooey wall that's smashed through by a couple of Deimos. Access comes through fear. But what really sets the city streets apart is how Nemesis is used. For the first and only time in the game, he lives up to his namesake by being an active pursuer. He bursts through a wall outside of a cutscene, and there's complete freedom in how to handle him, similar to how Mr. X was handled in Resident Evil 2. We have the option to tag straight to subway control if we want, but he arrives right after we get the lockpick, meaning there's a lot of optional stuff to return to that was previously stuck behind doors. Lots to see, lots to do, and Nemi on our tail. This is thrilling, living up to the promise of Resident Evil 3. That grace period is about to end.
Why is she here?
She's helping get the trains running again.
Bad time to start getting dead weight for. She's unreliable. Can't pull the trigger when it counts.
Hey, take it easy.
Fixing the subway, Jill reunites with the UBCS. Her initial distrust of Carlos starts to melt away, viewing him as a partner, meaning she can reserve her ire for Nikolai's frosty demeanor. Her thoughts turned to Carlos Oliveira. He might be one of Umbrella's hired hands, but he didn't come across as devious in any way. Whatever the case, she didn't have time to do any major interpreting, so she was going with her first impression. He was one of the good guys. Whether or not that would be of any help to her was another story. For the moment, she was willing to settle for any ally who didn't have plans to kill her. That reunion is short-lived though. The Nemesis is still on her trail. So let's say goodbye to the neon-soaked streets and open design and look at the remake's biggest misstep. Let's talk about the Nemesis Problem. In an interview with Gaming Bolt, producer Pete Fabiano said,
"We wanted Nemesis to give players the feeling that they were constantly being pursued by a relentless bioweapon. He's very agile in his movements. Game pacing is important, and we worked on striking a balance between having players feel anxious and also giving them periods of respite. Nemesis is a formidable foe, but not something that is completely insurmountable for someone as skilled as Jill."
After we leave the city streets, Nemesis transforms. Not physically, not yet, but systematically. Back in the day, the development team once labeled him the Pursuer. The name Nemesis came from a title change and English translation. The game was called The Last Escape in Japan and was renamed Nemesis in the West. As a pursuer, he is breathtaking. The work that went into designing Mr. X lay the foundation, but every setting has been dialed to 11. He doesn't have a slow, steady clump, he rushes at us. He's faster than Jill, so can outpace her in seconds, and if we are able to lose him by climbing up a ladder or pushing through a fence, he leaps into the air and comes crashing down on top of us. If you are able to put distance between you, he'll lash out with a tentacle that grabs Jill and drags her back. Much like Mr. X, he can't get in everywhere. The safe room is off limits, though he will patrol the cafe, just waiting for us to emerge if he sees her go in. The supermarket and toy shop are also safe, likely because the space is too small for him. In my mind, I can see him clipping into shelves and bookcases. It's a shame that the game doesn't turn these into destructive environments that he can freely burst into, but watching him wait patiently through a window brings the tension and makes him seem less mindless and more intelligent. He knows and we know that we've got to come out of there eventually. He even learns, adapting to player behavior. Here I am on a rocket launcher playthrough, feeling pretty indestructible, hopping about and making things explode. Bang, Nemesis down. Wham, Nemesis down. Boom, Nemesis down. Oh, wait a minute, did he just dodge that? Oh no. Unfortunately, his physical strength has been diluted from the original. Back in the day, he could cleave Jill in just a couple of hits, and downing him when he did appear was a mission. Now, a single grenade will blow him back, buying us around 20 seconds and gifting a supply crate with upgrades like an extended handgun magazine. In 1999, there were 7 of these. Now, there are 4, with a smaller window to collect them in. Original let us nab a supply crate right up to the final third. Uptown, Downtown, the RPD, and the Clocktower give us numerous chances to face him head on. Remake blasts past them in its first hour. Notably, one of the weapon upgrades that he drops is a silencer for the handgun. It ups the chance to get critical shots, but its primary function is to dampen sound. almost as if noise would be a gameplay factor when dealing with Nemesis again after the fact. But there isn't any time to use it because the game devolves into scripted chases by the time you get it. I've played Remake 4 times now and yet to find any evidence that Nemi reacts to sound. Just like in 1999, it's a mystery how he's able to hone in on Jill so easily. The closest we get is the Famitsu Guide, Complete Conquest of Nemesis. It tells us that he was repeatedly shown footage of stars in action so that he could develop acute facial recognition. Poor Nemi, he just wants his stars. Stars. His pursuer status is excellent. I just wish it was more present. When it comes to the remake, mechanically, he stops being a pursuer at the 25% mark. This is mainly because the game is in such a rush to burst through his forms and turn him into a mountain of goo. All in, Nemesis spends more playtime in his second form than his first, and that form has changed here, behaving less intelligently and more animalistic. As a giant dog beast thing, he's not in any position to actively pursue the player unless it's through bombastic cutscenes or quicktime events. Nemesis isn't a stalker, he's an event, a series of boss fights and scripted chases. Brad stumbled toward the sound of her voice as she saw that he was badly wounded. She stepped forwards, so focused on him that when he suddenly disappeared, she didn't understand what had happened. A wall of black had sprung between them, a blackness that emitted a deep, rumbling howl of fury. Jill knew what it was without seeing its face. She knew it like she knew her own dreams. Tyrant. It's been pointed out that Nemesis was heavily scripted in the original Resident Evil 3 as well, so it's hard to criticize the reimagining for relying on old tactics. That is partly true, but he appeared so much and typically like a jump scare that his arrivals weren't predictable, and they were hardly ever announced. He might have been scripted, a victim of PlayStation 1 hardware, but he never felt like it, and he didn't need to feel like it 4 generations later. Back then, it felt like he interrupted the flow of the game to ramp up the tension, rather than the entire game veering off onto a new track to include him. Take his introduction in 1999. He appears outside the Raccoon City Police Department and brutally murders Brad Vickers. We flee into the station, or, if you're a cocky so-and-so, you could prepare to fight him in the courtyard. Comment below if you've beaten him here. I never have. Once Jill makes it into the RPD, Nemi wouldn't follow, setting an expectation that would later be subverted. Nemesis was just like a zombie. He couldn't follow through doors. Right? Whoa, okay, you found another way in. It's alright though. Let's just dash through this door and lock him behind a transition. Oh god, he can open doors. That feeling later repeated in the Clocktower twice. The game so far led you to believe that he couldn't enter a room if you were looking at the door because they didn't program a door animation. Then, boom, here he comes tearing out of the dark to swipe at us, and later bursting down a door, destroying a room transition that was previously there and combining 2 spaces into a larger whole. Nemesis never breaks down a door in the remake. The game is in such a rush that he's never given the chance to. 2 of the windows imploded, a driving rain of glass spraying over the receptionist's body, shards of it slicing at Jill's bare legs. In the same instant, a giant black mass was hurled inside, bigger than a man. Stars killer. It was all she had time to think. Jill sprinted back the way she'd come, slamming into the evidence door. Behind her, she heard the ugly opening note of its single-minded cry. That is just 5 of the many scripted moments that build on each other to create really organic panic and tension. It's not just about the cutscenes, it's about how he breaks the game design. What does the car quicktime event or this section where we run down a hallway create? Because it isn't organic tension.
Come on, you creepy-ass stalker! You want stars? I'll give you stars!
Let me stop you right there, Jill. If you're going to lean into the cheese, you've got to earn it. "I'll give you stars" is the line from Resident Evil 3. It's the Jill sandwich line. It's the "you lose, big guy" line. It's that all-important cathartic button placed on Jill's final blow, the explosive goopy death of Nemesis at the end of the game. It's also optional, locked behind the game's last choice. It's on a t-shirt, for God's sake. It's earned because of how Nemesis is portrayed in that game. A constant, oppressive force of nature that in gameplay doggedly pursues Jill and forces quick, fast decision-making from the player. Run or fight, left or right, retreat or push on. Nemesis' attack on Jill in the subway station is not an "I'll give you stars" moment. It is a 30-second sprint with minimal decision making that ends with her sliding into the sewer. Remake Nemesis is extra. He's a show-off. He might not slay any STARS members, but he definitely slays when the camera's around. As Jill emerges from the sewer, he steps into shot, picks her up by the head, and even though he could pop her brains right there, he once again doesn't kill her when she's helpless. Crush our skull! His threat is constantly undercut because the game characterizes him as a being that needs to pause and think about showing off first. That might be purposeful to showcase his need for thinking time. Fine as an explanation, but it still makes him less anarchic and terrifying as a monster. He isn't Jill's nightmare tyrant, but in universe, his origins can be traced back to it. The work that went into Resident Evil 1's T2 fed into T103, the Mr. X variant. Nemesis is a mutated, re-engineered version of Mr. X with a warped new biology, but we'll talk about parasites later. Dr. Herman Frankel created Nemesis, much to the chagrin of Dr. Nathaniel Bard. He comes from Umbrella's European branch, a French facility if the transport papers are to be believed. Umbrella's reach isn't just regional or national, it's global. The Nemesis project is Umbrella given full form. He is a prototype. First of his kind, incredibly expensive, and it is a blessing to the world that Umbrella were soon exposed after his deployment because the plan was to lace a battlefield with copies of him. In his bipedal form, he towers over Jill, something the remake recreates like a reckoning. Pulsing ropes of fleshy tentacles pop out of his skin, connecting directly to his brainstem. We learn through supplementary material that using the tentacles, getting them damaged, actively impedes his cognitive function. The more they get hurt, the stupider he becomes, something that makes 1999's second form mean something, rather than the feral hound that he'll soon become. By the time we're ready to leave the Clocktower, the tentacles envelope him, thrashing out with greater reach, raw, powerful nerves on two humongous legs. In a nearby parking lot, he flies into a rage. Now armed with a huge flamethrower, he sets the floor, walls, and hapless zombies alight. There's no way to defend yourself. The game has suddenly designated him as invulnerable. We can't down him to buy any breathing room. In 1999, we chose when to fight and when to run for the first couple dozen Nemesis encounters, either through the choice system or in gameplay. We took ownership of how to handle the pursuer. In the remake, the game drags us by the collar. You can shoot Nemi here, but not here, or here, or here, or here. In 1999, I ran because I wanted to. I ran because I was scared. In the remake, I'm running away because the game is making me. Probably for the best, seeing as he's easier to kill now. The lack of choice elsewhere weakens Nemesis as an overarching antagonist. When Jill gets trapped by him on the parking lot roof, the shift in structure, the fact that she is now forced to fight him, is dampened because it's not the first time we've been trapped with him and forced into just one option. The apartment chase forced one option, the sequence with the car forced one option, the flamethrower chase forced one option. The game has consistently forced one option, so the sudden lack of choice here, approaching his first boss fight, doesn't instill that unique brand of panic. Because I can't help myself, let's flash back to the original. It isn't until the end of the Clocktower sequence, about the 2/3 point, that we get trapped by Nemesis and are forced to fight in frankly the toughest boss fight in the series. Hours and hours of choosing to flee build anticipation. Every time we get away from him, there's a wonder of what it will eventually be like when the game takes that choice away. The build-up enhances the terror. In the remake, Nemesis' first boss fight is built up by quick-time events, gimmicks, our heroes calling him a bitch, and the game constantly showing its hand. Thankfully, the fight itself is explosive, frenetic, and lives up to the tyrant's namesake. Two phases, one with his flamethrower and one without. Our goal? Hit the fuel tank. The danger? An arena that's catching fire. The imagery harnesses chaos. Nemesis on fire, unbothered by the flames, barely staggering and forever approaching. It's a sight to behold, and using the fuel tank as a weak point means it's a weakness detached from him. The Nemesis has no weaknesses.
Don't move!
Shit, chill.
Kendo, you're alright.
Yeah, all right's a stretch. Sorry, I got a little jumpy there. Didn't know quite what to expect.
No shit. Look, we're using the subway to get people out of town. You in?
Escaping the tyrant, Jill arrives around the back of the Raccoon City police station. You might think this is going to lead to a sequence inside the station, drawing a parallel with the original game, but it's instead an opportunity for the game to remind us of the tragedy of Robert Kendo. He and Jill are old friends, the sharpshooter and the arms dealer. He single-handedly armed stars with custom weaponry over the years, but just like when we saw him in Resident Evil 2, his stock hasn't protected him from the zombie hordes. He marks the second civilian that Jill meets, tries to help, and is rejected by. The first is this jackass, Dario.
Sir, what's your name? I can't just leave you behind.
It's Dario Rosso. And yeah, right. You just want to steal my safe house. Get your own, Missy.
A hapless idiot who hides in a container, showing the chaos of Raccoon's fall to madness. Back in the day, we could return here and see that Dario's container didn't protect him. The zombies killed him anyway. In the remake, he vanishes as quickly as he appears. That cool little detail has been cut for the sake of linearity. Just like when Leon met him, Robert Kendo reminds us how helpless the authorities are in the face of the outbreak. Jill isn't just a rookie cop, she's super cop, and even she can't save Kendo. She tells him about the subway, but he stays behind. His daughter's been bit. What else is there to do? The ineffectiveness of order against Raccoon's chaos is also embodied by the UBCS. They're portrayed as hyper-macho, overconfident, and pea-brained, a squadron of ex-cons thrown into a situation they're not prepared for.
Listen up, Pipsqueak.
A UBCS memo reads,
"Give those zombies something to eat. Just don't end up as dinner. Let's go grab a beer."
A mercenary sits with a bullet in his head next to a suicide note. It claims there were 30 guys in the squadron. Now, there's barely 4 left. Don't think about that though, don't wallow in that tragedy. Here's Nemesis with another chase sequence. His iconic rocket launcher's been restricted to 5 minutes of gameplay. Neil Newborn, best known for his work as Astarion in Baldur's Gate 3 or Heisenberg in Resident Evil Village, played a few characters in Resident Evil 3 Remake. He did the motion capture for Robert Kendo and Brad Vickers, but he mainly gravelled out a booming, echoing "stars" for Nemesis and played our human monster, UBCS mercenary Nikolai.
Nikolai is completely selfish and self-centered.
Newborn told the sound architect.
He's really logical about his actions. Everything's matter of fact. There's a lot of satisfaction to playing a character like that.
When it comes to Resident Evil's cast of villains, Nikolai Genevieve is a slightly dull enigma. His presence in 3 is overshadowed by Nemesis because the monster's on the box and has far more screen time. But even without Nemesis, Nikolai struggles to be memorable because his motives are simple and, at least in the original, he's not an obstacle for Jill or the player. He's a cold, calculated, greedy bastard. He's Albert Wesker if Wesker wasn't brought back and given depth after 1. If you're looking to scrape past the surface, you're looking at the wrong guy. Across the original, the remake, and the book, we're given 3 different Nikolais with varying degrees of intrigue. This isn't like Brian Irons where the sick essence of perversion remains intact. Remake's Nikolai remolds what we were given in 1999.
Funny how brainless zombies can ambush a platoon like that. Funny the gate was locked. Don't you think?
Jill makes it to the subway station and reunites with the UBCS. Carlos, Mikhail, and newcomer Tyrell are ready to blast off, but Nikolai is about to derail everything. Pun intended. Mikhail arches an eyebrow when he finds a quiet moment with Nikolai. He accuses the merc of sacrificing their comrades to zombies to save his own skin. His focus on self-preservation defines him, both through his actions off-screen, but also in what we see him do. During the outbreak, he lured a pack of dogs to Raccoon City University so he could watch as they ripped apart the survivors inside. He kills Murphy Seeker in cold blood without checking if he's been bit, and in a few moments, he'll lock Jill and Mikhail in the train with Nemesis. "It's not after me," he smirks. I love that line. Remake Nikolai is a rogue agent. He's not working for Umbrella, he's working for a mysterious third party, collecting combat data on the specimens running rampant. The more combat data he collects, the more money he makes. Simple. In the closing moments of the game, he teases that Jill would be interested in his employer, implying that it's Albert Wesker, but in the remake timeline that's yet to be defined. As the game goes on, Nikolai starts to be fascinated by Jill, her ability to survive the tyrant, her determination to save people, her selflessness in the face of unimaginable horror. Their initial meeting tells him that she'll die soon, and the more she proves him wrong, the more interested he becomes. His mission transforms from wild, unfocused data gathering to something more focused. Jill Valentine is all the combat data he needs. But I am reading between the lines a lot there. Textually, Nikolai doesn't do much until the closing 20 minutes. He shoots an Umbrella soldier who might have been infected, is a bit rude, locks a door so he can escape, and eventually helps to keep Nemesis down before ditching Jill. He'll soon kill the doctor in charge of the virus vaccine, Dr. Bard, but curiously leaves the vaccine behind, despite later doing everything in his power to grab it. When Jill finds Bard's body, she mutters, "This looks like Nikolai's handiwork." A strange response because it's just one bullet in a man's head. Nikolai's a serial killer without a ritual or tell. Despite that criticism, Remake's Nikolai has more gravitas than original Nikolai. There, he's just a greedy son of a gun who's an Umbrella ride or die, never acts as an obstacle to Jill, and dies. He doesn't believe in the corporation's goals, but he understands that working for them is the fastest route to a quick buck. His fate is different depending on what you choose. He either escapes, is nuked when Raccoon City blows, but the canon belief is he gets torn in half by Nemesis. When in doubt, assume the goriest ending is the canon one. His presence in that game comes from collectibles. Ominously, we find a fair few dead mercs who don't seem to be zombies and seem to have been shot. Photographs of specimens are littered throughout the city as we follow his trail, copies of the combat data that he's been collecting. Both renditions of the Ruthless Soviet pale in comparison to Nikolai number 3, the version in S.D. Perry's book. Werbowski turned his back and Nikolai squeezed the assault rifle's trigger. He stared blankly at the oozing body, wondering, not for the first time, why he felt no guilt when he killed. He'd heard the term sociopathic before and thought that it probably applied, although why people continued to see it as a negative, he didn't understand. It was the empathy thing, he supposed, the bulk of humanity acting as though the inability to relate was somehow wrong. Nikolai is a self-confessed sociopath on the page, but the longer the story goes on, the longer that Raccoon burns, the more that sociopathy turns into psychopathy. He isn't an Umbrella loyalist or working for a third party. His only priority is number 1. Umbrella send him in as Operation Watchdog. He's one of 10 secret people, unknown to each other, spread across the city, ordered to collect data on the T-virus outbreak, the monsters and the tyrants. When the book opens, Nikolai has discovered who the other 9 members of Operation Watchdog are and decides to hunt them down so he can get their combat data for himself. If he's the last watchdog standing, his data will be more valuable. When Davis Chan stepped out into the rain a few moments later, Nikolai had released most of his negative feelings of self-pity and undirected frustration. By the time his knife had finished with Chan, 15 minutes later, he was his old self again. He thanked the remains for getting him back on track. On the page, he wears 2 faces, a cold psychopath and a helpful, warm soldier. He enjoys the psychological twist of the knife when he betrays someone, so wants to get Jill and Carlos on his side so he can gleefully massacre them later. That part is framed as a serial killer's ritual. He's actually the reason Mikhail gets hurt. He shoots him with a sniper and then rushes after him, pretending to be his friend. He plans to nurse the soldier back to health before he slits his throat. It's sick. By the time we enter the endgame, he completely snaps, rambling, monologuing, blaming Jill and Carlos for any disruptions to his plans, even if they're miles away, hunted by Nemesis. "After I got here, I started to feel like I'd come to a very special place," he said. I felt that things were finally becoming the way they were supposed to be. But then Carlos tricked me, and the Valentine woman, I'm starting to think that she's the cause. She's why things have changed." As he spoke, he sensed the truth of it, as though a light was dawning in his mind's eye. It was true. Talking helped. Neither of the games give us that second mask or that descent into madness. He's a bastard right from the off, completely in control of his emotions, and never tries to hide that side of him. Thankfully for Jill, Mikhail's death isn't at the hands of Nikolai. When the Nemesis arrives, the platoon leader sacrifices himself and saves Jill.
Get off my train, shitbird!
As soon as the subway train explodes, it takes what's left of the original Resident Evil 3 with it. The story, the structure, and the illusion of a faithful but limited adaptation careen off course. As we shift perspectives to play as Carlos Oliveira, we've entered uncharted territory. And it's just not as good, is it?
Sorry.
Well, with a single exception. Brad Vickers, zombified and gurgling, ambushes Carlos Tyrell and ill-fated detective Marvin Branagh on the steps of the station. See, Resident Evil 3 is both a prequel and a sequel to Resident Evil 2. Jill's adventure kicks off on September 28th. In less than 24 hours, Claire Redfield and Leon Kennedy are going to arrive at the police station, and there they'll meet Marvin. Bitten, dying, clinging to his resolve as his life fades away. Resident Evil 3 Remake lets us see this moment, and to add to the tragedy, it's his friend and colleague Brad who gets him. He hesitates, and it costs him, meaning his furious words in Resident Evil 2 are given more weight.
And don't make my mistake. If you see one of those things, uniform or not, you do not hesitate.
Carlos and Tyrell have made it to the RPD to rescue Dr. Bard. Tyrell says they're to take him into custody, but Carlos is confused. He thought this was a rescue. His grasp of what Umbrella is and what's happening in the city is starting to slip. Is he working for the bad guys? The RPD's return shoots a flare gun at Resident Evil 3's level and puzzle design, encapsulating the problems we see across the whole game. The streamlining of Nemesis carries into the design philosophy as a whole. Exploration is lackluster, riddles are bare, and the game treats its environments like rooms to hurriedly burst through rather than pace and soak up. There's no chance of getting lost here because Carlos ignores all of the obstacles. He looks at the sign that says "Keep Out" and thinks, yeah, if you want me to keep out, I'll keep out. The statue with the medallions has a sheet over it. Tyrell orders us to ignore the doors with diamonds, hearts, and clubs on them. Fair enough, he's here on a mission, but it's a shame we don't get to see a new dynamic to the fall of the RPD. The cutscene of Marvin's attack, the death of 2 cops, and the eventual blasting of the wall in the locker room are the extent of it. In Resi 2, a humongous Nemesis-sized wall sat on the 3rd floor. Something tanked through it, and we were encouraged to wonder what happened. A ghostly image of Jill Valentine running from something monstrous. It turns out that we'll never learn how that wall exploded. Nemesis isn't in the RPD now. Because of the shuffling, restructuring, and determination to turn him into a giant dog, his most iconic pursuit has been cut altogether. Just like in 1999, we don't re-explore the whole police station, but even then, a chunk has been sliced away. Carlos explores 2 hallways and 4 rooms. Backtracking is minimal, so the tension doesn't get a chance to curdle. One optional safe encourages it, using the same combination from Resi 2, a neat detail that I appreciate, but as far as conquering a puzzle box goes, we are limited to entering the locker room, seeing we need a bomb, and walking through a nearby door to find it. There are at least options here, even if they're limited. If we kill Brad outside the front entrance, we can take his STARS ID card and use it on caches to retrieve bullets. A grim reward for putting a STARS member out of his misery. The toppling domino design of Resident Evil 2 Remake or Resident Evil 3 Original is absent. There was a danger in 1999 that returning to such an iconic location would feel too samey, too similar, but there are 2 reasons why that wasn't the case. The first is that the RPD tied to Jill thematically. This was once her home, the bedrock of crucial friendships that were torn apart at the Spencer mansion. Jill Valentine standing in the STARS office, staring at the abandoned desks of Chris Redfield or Barry Burton, had a delicate, gloomy feel. In the book, she finds comfort in the old furniture and reminders of her friends. Time to get to business. Jill stepped to her desk, randomly thinking that when she last sat there, she'd been a totally different person. It seemed like a lifetime had gone by since then. She lifted a small cloth bundle and unrolled it, looking over the picks and torsion bars with a practiced eye. A lockpick. In less than a minute, she was rewarded for her efforts. The gun safe swung open, and there, in plain sight, was the stainless steel answer to at least one of her recent prayers. "Bless you, Barry Burton," she breathed, lifting the heavy revolver. Entering as Carlos doesn't conjure that feeling because he's so detached from the STARS tragedy. The second is how exploration was handled. Nemesis brought the panic and fear, but even without him, the RPD was a puzzle box waiting to be solved. One big riddle that involved every room in the West Wing, finding a STARS ID card, unlocking an electronically sealed evidence box with a code, a STARS key, and a lockpick. There was a bit of head scratching, and importantly, the scouring of the environment added a bit of challenge. We had to hunt for what we needed. We had to backtrack. In Resident Evil 3, there's no puzzle. A linear donder through a couple of rooms gives us what we need without friction. Taking Resident Evil out of a single location that grows and expands, like the mansion or the RPD, reduces the importance of resource management, meaning you stop thinking tactically and strategically about a space. The importance of clearing specific hallways of zombies isn't as crucial anymore, because the chances of you ever returning to these spots is so low. Even though the original game sprawled out, gushing into numerous parts of the city, the various buildings and puzzles we encountered connected to each other, so you were constantly backtracking. Purely from a design perspective, the shops, hospital, and cafes were more like rooms in an outdoor mansion than different segregated places. It all flowed. We were still lost in a single location, it's just that location was larger. What mattered was that we were physically traveling from place to place in gameplay. The original benefited from structurally presenting contained locations, like the police station, as part of exploring the city. We needed to break in there to get a tool that unlocked the Uptown district, and could later backtrack into it if we wanted to grab, say, the grenade launcher. When looking at Resident Evil 3 as a whole horror experience, it was an exhausting, terrifying journey through the city. That has now completely changed because of all the cut content, shifting perspectives, and increased time jumps. There are less obstacles and less peaks and troughs for the tension. Now, Raccoon City feels less fluid, flexible and open, and more segmented. Whoosh, here's the city bit. Whoosh, here's the sewer bit. Whoosh, here's the RPD bit. Whoosh, here's the shallow shell of what should be the Clocktower bit. Whoosh, here's the hospital bit. None of these locations are connected to a previous location in the remake like they were in the original. There, the city was connected to the RPD. The Clocktower was connected to the hospital, the park, and the dead factory. It made everything feel larger in scale. And when we get to the minutiae of Remake's level design, we start to see just how much hand-holding there is. A yellow brick road is paved. Don't step off, something might get you. Let's jump back to the part of the game I actually like, the city streets.
You have to circle around through an alley to your right to get there.
You mean the alley that's on fire?
Maybe. Surely a tall drink of water like yourself can put out a few flames.
Jill Valentine passes a chain link fence with zombies banging on it. Behind it are numerous shops with clear neon signs inviting us to explore there later. She walks to the end of the street because it's the only place we can go, and there's a cutscene where she stares at a fiery alley. Clearly, we want to go that way. Any player would see the hydrant and the eye-catching fire and figure that that is the route. But the game stops Jill, does a cutscene where Carlos explains that, yes player, that is indeed the route. Then, gameplay is returned to us so Jill can turn around, walk 3 feet, and then another cutscene plays where the zombies laboriously topple the chain link fence. All of this could have been gameplay. Let me find the organic panic, game. Tape in the hospital, tape in the warehouse, tape in the apartment. Hell, there's yellow tape on the crates that we can break. It's all so streamlined so you don't need to wallow in the fear, you can just tank on to the next scripted chase sequence, because that's the focus now, right? I know that, for frankly stupid reasons, criticizing yellow paint has become a meme, but as a criticism, it still holds. Not only have other horror games, like Alan Wake 2, found other clever diegetic ways to guide the player through a photorealistic environment, but Resident Evil 3 already does that through its glorious lighting. It is a beautiful game, with expertly placed landmarks and light sources to subconsciously lead you on. It's bizarre that there's such an emphasis on yellow tape and paint when the signposting is legitimately so good that the game doesn't need it. The neon, the fire, the broken windows, lit by moonlight is all enough of a cue, and even if it wasn't, there's nothing wrong with letting the player get lost because that enhances tension. And we haven't even got to the puzzles yet.
Oh, thank God. Do you know how long I've been trying to reach somebody?
Don't worry, we're gonna get you out of there. Just tell me where you are.
I'm trapped in a goddamn hospital, surrounded by every kind of abomination. Look, just send in stars. They're gonna know what to do.
Dr. Bard isn't at the RPD. He's at the Spencer Memorial Hospital. Something's wrong though. The outbreak isn't the only thing threatening to break down his door. An Umbrella goon is as well. Nikolai. If Nikolai embodies the stereotypical selfish mercenary, Carlos is positioned as the antithesis to that. A selfless merc. A man who follows in every Resident Evil protagonist's shoes as being someone that just wants to help people. His characterization is another significant change from the source material, and I'm not just talking about his hair. The cheese factor is intact, with a sense of humor, optimism, awkward pickup lines, and an obvious attraction to Jill. But Remake Carlos handles the outbreak very differently from 1999's Carlos. There, he survived through spite, set on not dying in the pit that Umbrella threw him in. Almost over. This is almost over. Almost over. Carlos let the repeating thought drive away almost everything else, too fatigued to consider his feelings of anger and sorrow and fear, aware that his breaking point wasn't all that far off. He could sort through his emotions once they left Raccoon behind. At the Clocktower, he nearly breaks in face of what he's seen tonight. In the remake, we watch him slowly evolve as he loses faith in Umbrella as an employer. But do you know what doesn't involve? The puzzles. Remake's puzzles are dominated by keycard hunts, generators, switches, and batteries. It's all quite mechanical and industrial. In a vacuum, that's fine, but it does make us lose that classic Resi magic. The magical surrealism of things like the compass water puzzle, the crystal ball puzzle, the music box puzzle are gone, so our obstacles are all quite clinical. They're also much simpler. Take the subway map. The solution is right there on the same screen. We don't need to refer to a riddle or a clue, just follow the arrows and the prompts. A couple of the mandatory puzzles from the original have been carried over as optional afterthoughts. For example, the Kite Brothers Memorial is here, where we need to find and slot some gems to get a hip pouch, a grenade, and a tactical stock for the shotgun. I'm glad that it's here, because it's the only bizarre and aesthetically mystical puzzle in the game, but it's ushered off to the side, like the game's embarrassed by its weirder bits. A safe makes us run off to find an Aqua Queen poster with a combination scribbled on it. That's a neat reference to another mandatory puzzle from 1999. In the Umbrella office, we could use a remote to watch an Umbrella advert for Aqua Cure or Safsprin, Umbrella's cure for the common cold. A cryptic memo told us that one of those was the password to open the chemical storage. It forced us to be exposed to Umbrella's pharmaceutical products, engage with their role as the shadowy corporate overlord that's ruled and destroyed their company town. You'll notice that all of the examples I've just given there are from that opening section in the city streets. That's because after this point, puzzles don't really return aside from the vaccine synthesizer at the end of the game, the hunt for a bomb in the RPD, the hunt for the tape in the hospital, and the lackluster battery pack in the sewers. The sewers are especially notable because they're a new level added to the remake, but as a space they are hardly a labyrinth like you'd expect from past Resi titles. 2 boring tunnels and a couple of rooms. If we flash over to the original, there's a methodical, rigorous blueprint teeming with puzzles that could have been tweaked and ported over. In fact, Resi 3 has some of the most difficult obstacles in the series, with items that need to be combined and puzzles that sit inside of puzzles to only unlock part of a solution. A rusty crank that opened a shutter but then broke, so we needed to find a wrench to finish the job, is an example of one of the easier ones. But then there's the pipe puzzle in the Dead Factory, where we need to turn a series of valves to unlock a path. The puzzle in the park, where you need to flip cogs in a limited number of moves to drain the fountain. Or, worst of all, the water sample puzzle, something that makes Silent Hill 3's long division look like a cakewalk. The challenge with the original's puzzles wasn't necessarily that they were humongous brain teasers, but the cumbersome UI and how the hints and riddles associated with them were limited. In fact, some of them just felt a little bit random. The infamous water sample puzzle is tricky, but in a remake, it could have been a solid head-scratcher. Because what made it frustrating in 1999 was that you needed to keep jumping into a menu that had sub-menus to select your options. Or take room 402 in the hospital. Carlos needed to move a cabinet onto a pressure point to knock a painting of the Arklay Mountains off the wall. Behind that painting is a safe. The solution is to compare the layout of room 402 with room 401. There's a cabinet in there already on a pressure plate. Nothing in the game tells you that you need to compare both rooms, but even if it did, that wouldn't be the end of the story. Because you don't need to copy the position of the cabinet, oh no, you need to move 402's cabinet to the opposite position to 401's. It's nonsense. Ah, but then who could forget the crystal ball and clocks puzzle? A scrap of paper tells us that.
Give your soul to the goddess. Put your hands together to pray before her.
Okay, no problem. Here we have 3 paintings, need to align the hands on the clocks so they tell the same time. We do this by placing 3 different balls made of 3 different materials in the right order so that their weight moves the hands just enough. But here's the kicker. The game never tells you how much the balls weigh. It feels random. It's enough to make you want to blow the clock tower to smithereens. The clock tower. The clock tower. Blow the clock tower to smithereens. Yeah, okay. Let's finally talk about the clock tower. St. Michael's Clock Tower sits to the north centre of the city, waiting patiently on the far side of the circular river. A brochure in the remake fleshes out its history, telling us that it was a Baroque-style building with an elementary school built into it, and its maintenance and redevelopment was led by the Umbrella Corporation. At the end of that brochure, a simple sentence states,
It has become a beloved icon, and residents consider it to be emblematic of the city as a whole.
That's true of Resident Evil as a franchise as well. The Clock Tower is emblematic of the series' mood, its wild puzzles, and its focus on gothic architecture that juxtaposes high-tech weaponry and modern-day action heroes. In universe, it's a symbol of a great city effort, a gorgeous monument and architectural landmark that sadly fell to ruin. Umbrella then took control of it and Umbrella'd it, filling it with insane secrets and their unique brand of paranoia. It's awesome. It's been cut from Resident Evil 3 Remake.
Carlos, respond.
Yeah, what's up?
We didn't make it. The train derailed.
Derailed? Was anyone hurt?
No, everybody's dead. Mihail, everybody.
Ah, shit.
Reeling from the subway crash, Jill makes it topside and sees the clock tower in the distance. After such a whirlwind of pacing where we're racing along, mashing QuickTime events and blasting dozens of zombies with an assault rifle, St. Michael's beckons as a pacing reset. Nemesis was just engulfed in fire and metal. It's time to take stock, take a breath, and explore a creepy old cathedral. But no, instead, the game keeps yelling.
What happened? Jill, come in!
Let's leave Jill to do what she does best, eternally run in an endless void of scripted chases and flash back to 1999. Because it's not the only thing that gets cut, and I know some of you don't know what you missed out on. Carlos stepped toward Jill, gently touching one abraded shoulder, and felt her body stiffen beneath his fingers. He quickly dropped his hand, afraid that he'd offended her somehow, and then realized that she was staring out at something, a look of pure amazement on her delicate features. A giant 3- or 4-story tower looming over them, silhouetted against the backdrop of a clouded night sky. A glowing white clock face near the top read that it was almost midnight. "Somebody loves us, Carlos," Jill said, and Carlos could only nod mutely. Following the attack on the tram, it's a tram in the original, not a subway train, don't worry about it. Jill and Carlos escape to the clock tower, mourning the death of Mikhail, suspicious of Nikolai, and relieved that Nemesis appears to finally be dead. Luckily, the tram crashed right into the one place they wanted to be. St. Michael's was a designated evacuation point. The UBCS were looking to evacuate everyone, but priority was given to Umbrella personnel. They were instructed to bring all survivors to the clock tower and ring the bell to call in a chopper. It's overrun with the walking undead when we arrive, but we have a clear goal: ring the bell, get the hell out of Dodge. In the book, the clock tower is a pivotal moment. The book has a quick, fast, non-stop tempo, and it lets our heroes take a breather. Jill is forced to take control because Carlos is cracking under pressure, and her strength is showcased because she also has to battle her own trauma while doing so. The echoing main hall, the ornate decor, the numerous studies and libraries, the ridiculous puzzles that build on each other, 2 keys, cogs, paintings, music boxes we need to remember the notes of. It all flashes her back to the Spencer mansion. It feels like a final cruel joke in a night of cruel jokes. And just listen to that throbbing dirge of a theme with its distant clacking and rumbling approach. It reminded her of the Spencer Mansion's foyer, the low lights and gothic scrollwork giving it a kind of shabbily elegant atmosphere. A wide marble staircase dominated the large room, leading up to a second-floor landing with stained glass windows. There were doors on either side, a couple of polished wood tables in front of them, and to their left, Jill sighed inwardly and felt something inside tighten a little. She hadn't expected the Clocktower to be an untouched sanctuary, but she realized she had hoped, a hope lost at the sight of more death. As a landmark, it shoves Umbrella front and center and brings the grand gothicism to Resident Evil 3. Sure, the RPD is there, but it's a location we know intimately already. St. Michael's makes Jill reflect on the men hiding behind the curtain, or hiding behind the umbrella. Why? Why such elaborate secrecy? Most of the bizarre little mechanisms were too much, too intricate to be practical, time-wise or functionally. What was the point? After giving it a lot of thought, Jill had finally concluded that Umbrella's real board of directors, the ones no one knew about, were paranoid fanatics. They were self-involved children playing secret agent games and betting with other people's lives. Because they could. Because no one had ever explained to them that hiding toys and making treasure maps was something people outgrew. Honing in purely on the game, this is one of a few locations that let us see how deep Umbrella's reach goes when it comes to REQUIEM. By the time the game is over, we learn that the corporation has burrowed into St. Michael's, the park, the corporate offices, the police department, the hospital, city hall, and the subway system. Umbrella is Raccoon City. It's spun a web that goes further as every footstep falls. Soldiers and evacuees might have made it here, but in the time since, spiders have moved in, spinning their own web, eating the innocent, and making Jill shiver as she remembers the tunnels of the Spencer estate. Oh, and did I mention that Nemesis is here too? Despite the spiders and the zombies and the traps, there's a temporary feeling of calm as we settle into the rhythm of classic Nemesis-less Resident Evil. So when he ambushes Jill on the outside balcony, the fear peaks because it was so unexpected. He stalks us around the Clocktower, whether we're playing as Jill here or Carlos later. It's not a one-and-done location, it soon becomes a space for Jill's recovery and a base for Carlos's expedition to the hospital. This all builds to a powerful, terrible explosion. The Clocktower bell tolls and a chopper flies in. Jill thinks to herself that it's finally over and this feels like it could be the end, and then, boom. Nemesis blows it out of the sky, knocks Carlos out cold, and infects us with the T-virus. That infection is particularly powerful because it happens before the boss fight. The massive health bar, wide swings, and tight arena is one thing, but the true fear comes from checking our inventory and seeing a new word, virus, sitting there blankly staring at us. A reminder that this has all gone very wrong and spiking the difficulty because we can't see how hurt Jill is anymore. Careful, or you might waste a first aid spray. The Clocktower is the most egregious example of cut content, but it's not all that's been hacked away. The city streets are smaller because we only get to explore downtown. Uptown is effectively gone with everything that carries with it. The gas station, a moment that unifies Jill and Carlos as partners, is gone, including the electronic lock puzzle. City Hall was basically just a pathway with a statue, but it brought another Nemesis ambush and had a puzzle that's been scrapped. It let us see Raccoon's governing body, lending credence to when we hear more about how the mayor is in Umbrella's pocket. The Raccoon newspaper office is gone, a moment when Nemesis corners us and with files that let us see how the press reported on the outbreak. The park is also gone, including the graveyard, the reconnaissance point, the associated puzzles, and Jill's standoff with Nikolai. The fact the Clocktower and the park are gone mean their associated monsters have vanished as well. Just like in Resident Evil 2, the giant spiders are missing. A whole boss encounter has been removed. Two gravediggers, brown and white, attack Jill at two separate points. Once when the ground collapses beneath her, and later in the park. Worms that once burrowed into the soil have been exposed to biohazardous waste and have grown into gigantic tea-infested monstrosities. Nikolai realized that it was an animal, one that surely never existed before. The gnashing circle of pointed tusks and teeth that tipped the massive white worm body were proof enough. It bellowed again, arching, a titan of maggots and lamprey eel, of waxworm and snake, as big around as a man was tall. It dove away from Nikolai. It charged at Jill Valentine. I've seen a bizarre insistence that the gravediggers have now been transformed into regular enemies the same way the G-Adult was in Resident Evil 2, but that is simply not true in function or in lore. This thing isn't a gravedigger, it's a Hunter Gamma, a monster that already existed in 1999. Speaking to Silicon Era, Pete Fabiano commented on the tepid response to Resi 3, saying,
"We do our best to please as many people as possible while staying on vision and creating the game that the team wants to make. In the end, we were able to create the product we set out to, and we are proud of the results. We try to keep aware of what users are saying, and we'll do our best to incorporate their feedback in future titles.
I think Fabiano's outlook shows the flawed design philosophy behind recreating Resident Evil 3. Capcom wanted to make a Nemesis game, and they did, albeit a flawed one. But in focusing so much on the tyrant, they missed all the other things that made 1999 such a memorable, beloved part of this story. Exploring Raccoon City rather than racing through it, and a major emphasis on choice, the key ingredient when it comes to survival horror. Let's jump back to the Clocktower. Nemesis charges and time slows. A choice is presented to the player. How do we get out of this one? Do we blind him with a spotlight or shock him with an electric cord? The latter is riskier because it will bring Jill closer to him, but rewards us with a dropped supply case. The former is safer because the spotlight is further away, but we don't get a reward. The consequences of these actions aren't necessarily what's important. It's the quick, fast decision making that we're forced into. It was Yasuhisa Kawamura's baby, the game's writer, and something that added a change of feeling to Resident Evil 3. The clock ticked down as you weighed up your options, and if time ran out, you'd have to contend with Nemesis in a more hands-on way. Sometimes the rewards are substantial. For example, if we stay behind and fight Nemi outside the RPD, we can grab Brad's stars card and skip a chunk of puzzle solving. Later choices, like the bridge outside the Dead Factory, dominoed into the game's resolution. Nikolai's fate is in our hands. Choices we make here will determine if he lives or dies. Now, just like when it came to the zapping system of Resident Evil 2, I don't need live selection to carry over into the remake. But also, like with Resident Evil 2, it's a shame that it didn't. It's one of the earlier examples of players influencing a narrative in a substantial way, especially because this remake prioritizes lengthy cutscenes and QuickTime events. It felt like live selection ought to be here, but was ultimately cut. Beautifully, SD Perry brings its essence into her writing. Jill sighed, the low gnaw of dread in her stomach so constant that she no longer noticed it. Outside, the decaying carriers continued to struggle and cry, beating helplessly against the door. Might as well run through her options. She had a few minutes to kill. The book isn't structured like a choose-your-own-adventure, but there are numerous points where we see Jill's frantic decision-making. She weighs her options, thinks about where to escape to. A solid, heavy footstep. Another. Jill cocked her head. Go back to the newspaper office or back to the station? No way I can outrun it. What about the gas station? It has a metal lockdown shutter and there's a shitload of cars. Better to hide. I knew the second Nemesis changed here that the game was a disappointment. Just over 2 hours in, Nemesis, the Pursuer, is replaced by Nemesis, the dog beast thing. It's not a terrible boss fight, but it feels like we've gotten here far too quickly. 2 phases, throw it down into the courtyard, crushing slab and stone under its massive claws, and up into the circle of debris acting as our ring. We need to set a trap with the mine launcher or wait for it to slow and blast it down. The issue is the telegraphing. We just got the mines and haven't even had time to fight normal monsters with them, so nothing tutorialized what we should do here. And it's the only option when he runs circles. Choice is limited. The tyrant is mindless, feral, with wild sweeping attacks and a lucky weakness to fire, building off how it seems to be the only thing that slowed it down all night. It doesn't infect Jill at the start of the battle, so we can monitor her health clearly. That excellent addition to the difficulty and pressure has been scrapped. Now, Jill catches the T-virus because her rage bleeds into overconfidence. Her worst nightmare come true. Let's talk about surviving the horror.
Fight it, Jill. I'm gonna get you the vaccine.
Carlos Oliveira epitomizes why I don't like machine guns in horror games. We play as him when Jill gets infected, slowly turning into a zombie. He brings her to the Spencer Memorial Hospital, a medical center named after Umbrella's CEO and, just like the police station, an Umbrella front. Dr. Bard is here, and he apparently knows how to make a vaccine. If he acts fast, Carlos can complete his mission and save Jill. The hospital is the second best part of the remake. The city streets are more layered, and the inclusion of Nemesis heightens everything, but the sinister notes of Spencer Memorial get to grow the longer we explore. The hospital was a den of corruption long before the T-virus leaked into the sewer. Bard was a chief doctor, and a rancid piece of shit. Our overarching puzzle, a tape recorder, is given narrative context in a way that makes Umbrella's staff creepy outside of the monsters they are cooking up. The tape we use is actually a secret recording a nurse planned to send to HR. We hear him confessing to working with Umbrella and having a go at her. "Polish my shoes," he leers. "You know all about polishing shoes, don't you?" Combat is a major focus here because the hospital is overrun. It was where patients bitten by the T-virus were sent in the early days. The nurses didn't know what was happening, thinking it was just a flu epidemic, but the administration did. They were sending patients down to the storage facility below to be experimented on. Some of them weren't even infected. A lot of work has gone into making the hospital feel tense with a capital T. Zombies stand behind reinforced glass, tapping on the window and waiting to burst out. Suspicious claw marks scar the walls, and we see the shapes of something monstrous prowling in nearby rooms. Carlos' position as a mercenary doesn't spoil this tension. The hospital's environmental storytelling is still really powerful, but that bubble does dissolve when he pulls the trigger. This isn't a problem unique to Resident Evil 3 Remake. Resi 2 had a submachine gun, and back in 1999, Carlos also mowed down gooey hordes with an assault rifle. Ah, a hunter! Oh wait, never mind. Bang, 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 bang. Unless it's restricted to a burst setting, automatic weaponry cuts out that all-important interval between shots that makes beat-to-beat combat so palpable. According to Shinji Mikami, it was one of the core pillars of Resident Evil's game feel. In an interview with Famitsu, he said,
"With Resident Evil, you're controlling these special ops guys, and yet they fire their handguns pretty slowly, right? Even at the time, people on the dev team would say, these guys have special weapons training, aren't they firing a little too slow? But there was a reason for that. You could shoot a zombie once, but they'd still keep coming towards you, right? He might bite you before you get the next shot off. That's the kind of fear I wanted the player to feel. That interval is really important."
I have referenced that interview before, back when I talked about The Evil Within, and I will probably reference it again before we say goodbye to Resident Evil, because as a series, it would go on to discard slow fire rates to the detriment of its horror. Resident Evil 3 has a more action-packed focus than Resident Evil 2, so even when Carlos and his tension killer are absent, Jill has been tweaked to pack a bigger punch. The handgun, shotgun, and magnum keep the rhythm of the classic game, but the grenade launcher has been upgraded. It can now stack mine rounds, a great tool that brings anticipation and planning. In 1999, they were a little cumbersome because they weren't ammo for the grenade launcher, they were ammo for a separate weapon, the mine launcher. Merging the two into one gun is a major boon that is awesome to see. The grenade launcher acts very differently to how it did in Resident Evil 2. There, that slow fire rate and all-important interval were deliciously agonizing because it could only hold one shell at a time. You'd need to reload between shots. In Resident Evil 3, it can stack up to 5 shells. That's smart because when we're going toe-to-toe with Nemesis, needing to reload between shots would become frustrating rather than tense. It's a difficult beam to balance, and the grenade launcher fast becomes the weapon of the game, sitting in an optional area that we need to hunt for... Oh wait, if you miss it in the optional area, the game just gives it to you. That's underwhelming. Guess I don't need to explore then. Noted, game, thanks for telling me that.
My employer, the Umbrella Corporation, engineered this virus. And they ordered my team to develop a vaccine, which we did. Now, I keep samples of this vaccine here in my office. The rest of it is stored underground. But those sons of bitches at the board, they want to destroy it.
Dr. Nathaniel Bard is dead, killed by Nikolai. No great loss, but in his last moments he recorded a video outing Umbrella for their involvement in the outbreak. We never see proof that he managed to send the video to the US government, but we do learn that he had a direct line to US Senator Greg Tester. For the first and only time in the series, we get to see a piece of valuable evidence that could believably be used in the raccoon trials that shut Umbrella down once and for all. Neat. As he retrieves the vaccine, Carlos reels at Bard's confession. It's all true. He's been working for the bad guys this whole time. He should be reeling at the game's resource management though, ha ha ha. Blue herbs are gone. Don't ask why, you won't get an answer, there is no answer. Some parts of the universe will always be a mystery, they just are. Even with the absence of poisonous monsters, like the spiders, that is strange, because blue herbs aren't just for poison, they're also for constitution boosting, buffing our defenses. It's a key part of the previous 2 games' resource management, planning, preparation, and choice. Gone forever. Items can't be combined outside of our inventory anymore, or rather, they can, but only when our inventory is full. It's just a minor gripe, but Resi 3 loses the convenience of figuring out where to put an item in our inventory or choosing to combine then and there. What is more convenient now is ammo crafting, a system that's been streamlined and modernized in a way that's smoother to use while losing its depth. Ammo crafting in Remake operates the same way it did in Resi 2 Remake. You find 2 bits of gunpowder, mash them together, and boom, we've got our ammo. Lovely. It eliminates the clunky reloading tool that we had to carry in our inventory in the original, sacrificing a precious spot so we could whip up bullets in the field. Realistically, you'd always leave this back in the save room and use it when you got to take a breather. That helped the ebb and flow of the game because it added to the feeling that your save rooms were small hubs of preparation. In line with Resi 3's emphasis on action, crafting in the field makes fights feel scrappier. Back in 1999, there were 13 types of ammo you could craft. A gunpowder would give you handgun bullets, B gunpowder would give you shotgun shells, and then combining them would make C gunpowder, that went on to be combined further to make grenade shells or magnum rounds. You could then combine that powder again to make special types of grenade shells, like freeze rounds. Freeze rounds have also been cut from the remake? Wow, that pile just keeps growing, huh? What made this crafting system so special in 1999 was that the more we made with specific combinations, the more types we unlocked, eventually crafting things like enhanced handgun rounds that made zombies' heads go pop. Your preparation mattered. It led into a considered power fantasy. Crafting is generally less important in the remake because ammo is everywhere, littered in numerous yellow-tinged crates, and because resource management is less important. For a game that's even faster paced, like Resident Evil 4, that isn't an issue, because there are numerous clever ways that game keeps the tension instead. Namely by giving us enemies and monsters that are speedier and can dodge our attacks. We have more ammo because we're going to waste more ammo. But Resident Evil 3 is a reimagining of a slow-paced survival horror game. Sure, in 1999, Jill and zombies had faster movement. Sure, it brought automatically running up and down stairs to the genre, ooh. But in 2020, nobody is asking for its core design philosophy to be ripped out and replaced with more explosions, more quick-time events, less resource management, and more Resident Evil 4 isms. Self-defense items have not carried over from Resident Evil 2. Jill now has one knife that never breaks, it's a permanent weapon, and she can't slash at a zombie or stuff a grenade in their mouth when they grab her. Instead, you know what they've replaced them with, it's quick-time events galore, baby. Don't worry about making sure you use an inventory slot to secure a quick getaway, just don't worry about it. This is Resident Evil 3, you're not here to worry, you're not here for friction, you're here for a roller coaster ride. Carlos makes it back to Jill's room and injects her with the vaccine, just in time. She's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And then, Tyrell arrives with bad news. And that's not all that's followed him here.
Tyrell. What the hell happened?
Attention all citizens. The contagion spreading throughout the city has been designated uncontainable. On October 1st, Raccoon City will be completely destroyed in a missile strike. All residents capable of rational thought are urged to evacuate immediately. This is not a test.
One day from now, the city blows. The US government have decided to contain the outbreak with a very big bomb. As Jill slowly starts to recover, still unconscious, a horde of zombies burst into the hospital's entrance, and Carlos is thrown into the thick of it. Thankfully, the main entrance has a couple of helpful tools, generators that zap monsters when shot. These and red barrels are around every corner, something that makes large-scale ambushes like this pure anarchy. The idea of environmental weapons comes from 1999. Some red barrels sat in the city streets, fuel sources for the soldiers that are now bombs waiting to go off. And that's not the only core piece of combat carried over to the remake. The quick-step, or emergency dodge, was and is finicky, but completely changed how the dynamic duo felt when facing down one of Umbrella's experiments. Especially when it came to Nemesis, the emergency dodge was a key way that we could get the better of him without dampening his impact. Either with R1 or by aiming just as a zombie attacks, Jill also has a random chance to not past a zombie if she sprints past their grab. Nothing scarier than letting a monster attack in the hope we can dodge out of the way. Enemies don't wait their turn, they lunge, they swarm, they crowd you into corners and punish hesitation. And that is where the rhythm of the game lies. You're always caught in a tight little dance of decision making, shoot or run, reload or switch weapon, dodge or take the hit. And when that emergency dodge lands just right, a flash of perfect timing, Jill auto-aims for a counter shot. It's a mechanic that rewards precision and nerves of steel, and when it clicks, it sings. It's a brief flash of genius that makes you feel like you're surviving through skill, not just firepower. Moment to moment, the remake is a game of thresholds. Just like in Resi 2, how far can I push forward before the next healing item? How long can I keep this enemy at bay without switching to my good ammo? It creates a thudding rhythm of fight, run, regroup, repeat. And in those small in-between moments, the hallway lull before something snarls behind a curtain, you get a glimpse of the survival horror soul hiding under all the set dressing. It's not nearly as refined as Resident Evil 2 Remake, overemphasizing the action, but when you do pull the trigger, it does feel satisfying. Less dread, more desperation. It makes fights feel faster, more panicky, and on repeat playthroughs, it emphasizes Jill's growth as the action hero who doesn't look back as Raccoon City burns. So, let's return to her and talk about what stands in the way of her last escape. The Dead Factory is a cool name. It's blunt, it's bleak, it has two meanings. It was where Umbrella disposed of dead bioweapon waste, and it's also where monsters were created. It is literally a dead factory built inside a dead factory. In 2020, the dead factory that sat to the north of the city is gone, replaced with Nest 2. A secret laboratory built under the hospital, dedicated to exploring real-world applications of bioweapons. The white, shining corridors standardize Umbrella's scientific aesthetic. Just like in Resident Evil 2 Remake, they haven't repurposed parts of Raccoon City, they've completely overhauled them. Some of the bodies down here are zombies, others are victims of Nikolai. It's Jill's first stop when she wakes up. There was something happening to her. It felt like her veins were heating and expanding. Like her every cell was becoming thick and heavy with strange spices, sticking to the cells around it, all of them boiling gently. Like her whole body was a vessel filled with moving, wet heat. After deciding that she was alive, Jill opened her eyes.
Morning, sunshine.
You saved my life.
I sure as shit didn't. That was all Carlos. He carried you here and he treated you himself, crazy bastard.
Where is he?
He went underground. Bard stockpiled the vaccine, enough to give the city some hope.
Our goal is to synthesize a vaccine. Carlos has gone on ahead. Tyrell will stay behind to try and get through to the military and buy some time before the bomb hits. Maybe if we tell them we found a cure for the T-virus, they'll cancel the launch. The storage facility that leads into Nest 2 has something strange though. Something bizarre. A new breed of virus carrier. Paleheads originated in the Ghost Survivor chapters from Resident Evil 2 Remake, but they were treated as a one-off gimmick, similar to the armored and poison zombies. Their design was so crusty and slick that they became a fan favorite for anyone who played that DLC. So now here they are, gurgling in Nest 2. Just like the Crimson Heads from Resident Evil 1, they're a result of the Epsilon strain of the T-virus, and can regenerate health thanks to the white mass that their flesh has become. They do double damage and are faster than the virus carriers wandering the streets above. While they're not chameleons, their grey flesh blends into the cold walls of the labs, and they skulk under machinery and body bags, waiting to pounce. Thankfully, one shot to the head with the Magnum takes them down and I am drowning in ammo, so boom! The parasite zombies come from Nemesis. Whether as a tactic to kill Jill or an innate need to go forth and multiply, he infects them with his own unique brand of bioweapon and they launch at us. They encase the zombie's head in a protective helmet, hardening and crystallizing so headshots are no longer as effective. You need to blast away until they open up, and they've got wild reach, harking back to the Ganados of Resident Evil 4. It turns out that that's on purpose. When they created Nemesis, Umbrella took a T-103 Tyrant and implanted it with an NE-alpha parasite. a re-engineered version of Resident Evil 4's Las Plagas. Speaking to PlayStation Blog, the game director Kyohiko Sakata said,
"Any alpha was created to imitate a parasitic quality. We wanted infected enemies to be visually similar to the Plagas-infected Ganados as a means for fans to piece together how Nemesis fits within the whole Resident Evil franchise."
Connecting Nemesis and his children to Resident Evil 4 is awesome, making Umbrella and by extension its founder Oswald Spencer more involved in that game's monsters. Resident Evil 3 Remake makes it that Las Plagas and Los Illuminados aren't segregated from Umbrella's cruelty anymore. They helped to inspire it. The Drain Deimos are oversized fleas, literally. Fleas that have been exposed to biowaste the same way that the Gravedigger was. It's strange that the Deimos are new creatures considering they look similar and behave almost identically to the Chimeras from the Spencer Mansion. But their position as insects gives them a scuttling, scabby quality. Tick, tick, tick. Nikolai froze, understanding the sound instantly. Something screaming, leaping from the dark as the other joined in its monstrous song, moving black hell in stereo. He saw the raised hook claws of the one in front, the snapping, dripping mandibles, the gleaming insectile eyes. They're gross, with a gratuitous animation where they shove a long tube down Jill's throat and try to pump her with a parasite. A great opportunity for blue herbs to be useful, but hey, whatever, apparently green herbs work just as well, so who cares about variety? They're easy to kill, quick, come in large numbers, and cling to ceilings. It's just a shame that they're locked into one zone. In 1999, they had one hell of a libido, so infested parts of the Clocktower and the Dead Factory. Creepy crawlies that creeped us out right into the closing chapter.
Keep going. We're almost there. No!
Tyrell Patrick is here to die, and die he does, being the only person Nemesis ever kills. Mikhail doesn't count, he blows himself up. In S.D. Perry's book, he's actually a watchdog and an eventual victim of Nikolai, sent into Raccoon City to monitor on events and send back combat data. It's unclear if that's his role in the remake, but would explain why he's always typing on that damn laptop, and why he has a direct line to Umbrella leadership. His death is the kickoff for Jill's desolate dive into the bowels of Nest. Just a couple of rooms away, hunters and tyrants sit in vats, waiting to spring into action. Something ripped the air inches from Carlo's face, would have hit him if not for his stumbling step backwards. An impression of shining black claws and a hard, ribbed body. This is the most unnerving a hunter has ever looked. The twitching, sensing mandibles make their threat intimate, where before they were cold, killing machines. Quick as a flash with a one-hit decapitation. Bringing them out of the Spencer Mansion and into Raccoon City institutionalized them in 1999. If you were a fan, there was a real shock seeing that Umbrella had been able to mass-produce the most terrifying monsters of the first game. And seeing them in the detached, icy settings of the hospital and the labs makes them feel like manufactured weapons, rather than unhinged monsters. Some rogue scientists took discarded hunter samples and raised them in the sewers. Yet another way that the T-virus could get unleashed into the city. Add it to Umbrella's list of sins. The sound that followed, the furious pig-like battle cry of some distinctly mutant creature, got him moving again. Its body was a dark blue-green, almost black in the dim red light. With its webbed, oversized hands and feet and its huge rounded head and mouth, it resembled nothing so much as a mammoth, hideously squashed frog. Their skin's like steel, impervious to damage. A direct assault is ineffective, and they can open their gigantic, toady mouths to eat Jill up for a one-hit kill. There's some lovely risk-reward there. If you can manage to shoot it in the mouth while it's open, preparing to devour us, the reward is some nasty damage. They slither out of pipes in the sewers and splash around in the cold waste. It's a major improvement over their somewhat random appearance in the original. There, Carlos found a couple globbing around in vats in a basement. Giving them a narrative fueled by the arrogance of disgraced scientists makes them memorable, and they do appear again after the fact, so they don't vanish as quickly as the Drain Deimos. The zombies are easier to kill than the last game, but less crumbly and gooey. We can shoot pieces off of them, like their legs and arms, but it's harder. Here you can see me just going to town trying to shoot a zombie in half with a shotgun and nothing is breaking. Jill's knife, despite being indestructible, can't slice off limbs anymore. The restrictive way decomposition is handled can be blamed on the structure of the game and the action-packed focus. Blasting pieces off zombies helped us navigate the RPD. It was a mechanical means of conquering a space and making it safer when backtracking. Resident Evil 3's backtracking is minimal and the zombies are easier to kill, so why even bother? Because it's cool. Instead of splatters of gore, zombie deaths are heralded by a big thump where the screen blurs a little and we get to revel in the impact of a shot. It takes away the paranoia of knowing they're dead, but the game's level design wouldn't let us be paranoid about that anyway. Take the park. In 1999, zombies burst out of the ground because we passed through the graveyard. It offered a different skew, one hell of a scare, and forced us to rethink how we looked at our surroundings. Now, the park is gone, so the graveyard zombies are gone. Rest in peace, I guess. In the book, S.D. Perry tracks the passage of time through how quickly the zombies fall apart. At the dawn of the final day, Nikolai eyes them with disgust. They just kept getting slower and stickier. Raccoon already smelled like a giant cesspool, and it was only going to get worse as the virus carriers continued to decay, turning into grey, sludgy piles of malodorous stew. And speaking of Nikolai,
I don't think the wisdom I've been trying to impart on you is getting through. Now, I know you can't put a price on life. But I'm in this business to get paid.
using her extensive knowledge of antigens, adjuvants, medical machinery, and scientific equipment, Jill manages to synthesize a vaccine. Considering she was the brains to Chris's brawn in Resident Evil 1, it tracks that she could piece together a serum based off Bard's research papers. But it's still really silly, here and in 1999. Nemesis bursts through the roof, tentacles writhing, and we escape the only way we know how, by pushing up on the analog stick as a quick-time event. I might be bored, but it leaves Jill exhausted and Nikolai capitalizes on it, stealing the vaccine. Time to duke it out with the Nemesis. This is not a good boss fight. It undermines Jill and makes Nemesis boring. This won't surprise you by now, but let's jump back in time to 1999 to compare. There, Nemesis ambushed us in the waste disposal room. Valves dotted the walls, ready to be burst open and spray him with acid. The trick was to lure Nemesis near them and dodge out of the way so he hurts himself. The exposed nerves of his tentacles sizzled and popped. It was tense because you had to let him get close, you had to let him swing, and you had to rely on your dodging skills. Or did you? Because if you're like me and never really got the hang of dodging, you could fight Nemesis the good old-fashioned way, with lead and grenade rounds. It was simple, it was effective, it was stretched tight with options, and it was all Jill. A major takedown of Nemesis before he devolved into his globular, pulpy final form. Cut ahead to 2020, and we have a fight where Jill only beats Nemesis because Carlos helped her, where we have a fight that is just a frustrating repeat of what we already did at the Clocktower, where we battle a boss who, for the first time ever in a Resident Evil game, spawns lowly grunts to artificially up the difficulty. Zombies come spilling out of shoots around the arena, making it especially annoying to shoot Nemesis when he goes on a rampage because they will grab Jill from out of shot. It's not scary, it's just annoying. As he bubbles and melts away into acid, we stare down the barrel of the finale. Resident Evil 3 is a story about two things: Umbrella's wide reach and Jill's survival. It's the story of what happens when the lies rot away, when the monster doesn't die and the corporation lives on. And in the middle of it all, Jill Valentine. Her nightmare didn't end in the Spencer mansion, it's just changed location. But for all the screaming, all the spectacle, the remake forgets what it's trying to say. It remembers the monsters, but it forgets what they meant.
It's done. Give me the vaccine, you greedy son of a bitch.
No. You print money. I like money. We shall make ours an ongoing arrangement.
In the remake, Nikolai makes it a little longer than he did in S.D. Perry's version of the finale, pulling from my favourite of a variety of endings in the original game. There, he rants and rambles at Jill, holding her at gunpoint. Whatever was wrong with him to start, being in Raccoon has sparked into full-blown psychosis. And then, Nemesis throws a tentacle through the ceiling and rips him in half. In 2020, Nikolai stands on the edge of victory. He's got the vaccine, he's got a clear escape route, and he's smug enough to offer Jill Valentine a job. A bleak little punchline after everything she's been through. He even tries to frame it like an ongoing arrangement, a sinister epilogue in the making. And then Nemesis returns. Still mutating, still shrieking, still pulsing with Umbrella's ambition, the end result of hundreds of experiments, memos, failures, and corpses. Like all of their monsters, they built a weapon just in case. Catharsis doesn't come in the form of a rocket launcher, it comes from a railgun. Enter the finger. Note to self, rephrase that. This reimagined railgun is one of the few changes that works. In 1999, it was Paracelsus' sword, a weapon built by the US military to fight Umbrella. But this version recontextualizes it as Umbrella's own failsafe. A monster so powerful it can only be killed by its creators. It's a perfect metaphor for corporate rot, the disease and the cure created by the same hand. She could feel the energy building, the air around her heating up. She hated it with everything inside of her. The mutated, aberrant thing inched forward on a wave of slime as the cannon's hum reached an explosive crescendo, the sound drowning out everything. Jill's words went unheard, even by her. "You want stars? I'll give you stars." But then, the metaphor vanishes, because the fight itself is so weak. There's squandered potential here, Jill dragging the cannon into position and blasting Nemesis into a pulpy wall of limbs, but it shifts into a short, sharp fight where we need to destroy the glowing weak points, reposition power capsules, and charge the cannon again. It's almost good, but like so much of Resident Evil 3 Remake, it rushes the payoff. The first shot is handed to us without effort. The third is a quick-time event that completes itself even if we do nothing. There's no tension or catharsis in a button that doesn't matter. Compare that to the original, where we had to lure Nemesis into the cannon's range, where the risk was real, where positioning and patience mattered. The fight felt like a final test, not because it was hard, but because it demanded something of the player. A radar bleeped to the top of the screen, acting as our traditional Resi countdown, but given new context. This will be the biggest explosion of the series. Not just a mansion, not just a lab, but a city. When Nemesis finally ambushes us, it adds to that pressure. The remake has cut the countdown altogether. Its finale is treated like a cutscene you occasionally get to interrupt. This was meant to be the climax of Jill's story, the reckoning, the culmination of every moment she survived. But it plays out like the rest of the game, on rails with no room to breathe. And when the monster dies, again, it's not triumphant, it's procedural, and the cheesy line isn't nearly as deserving of a fist bump.
Come on! Next time, take the fucking hint!
This was her story, the story of what happens after the mansion, of how you survive something like that, of how trauma echoes. The book understood this and was ripe for plucking. The remake loses sight of her inner world the second she starts insulting the monsters. What follows is the final standoff on the helipad. Nikolai awaits Jill and Carlos, so we can sit back, relax, and watch as a high-stakes action set-piece plays out where the vaccine is destroyed and we are tossed a single QuickTime event as an afterthought. Like the game suddenly remembers that we're even here. At least this one has a fail state. To be clear, a single button press to eviscerate a monster or villain is absolutely fine when the prompts are used sparingly or are earned. But neither is true here.
Carlos!
Jill might survive, she might escape, but her journey through a short, time-jump-laden weekend doesn't let her find agency because we are constantly struggling to find agency. Mechanically, the game doesn't trust you to fail, and if you can't fail, then you're not surviving. You're just watching Jill survive. Failsafe QuickTime events that push her on, enemies that rarely overwhelm, items handed out like party favors. Even the idea of choice is gone, not just with the gutting of live selection, but in the way confronting Nemesis is handled. The remake doesn't even try. It doesn't let us choose anything. It just tells us what happens next. This isn't survival horror, it's horror-themed action. Horror as an aesthetic. And Jill, the woman who's lost friends, fought monsters, endured betrayal, is reduced to a delivery system for one-liners and scripted sequences. This was her moment to close a chapter, to carry the weight of her trauma, to face what Umbrella did to the city, to the people, and to her. But the game waves that away. It gives her a line, a chopper, and a mushroom cloud. Barry Burton isn't even here like he was in 1998 to bring everything full circle. But what about Umbrella's reach? It might gut Nemesis and it might skim Jill, but if Raccoon City got to be fleshed out and exposed like a raw nerve in the brand new RE engine, maybe that would be enough to justify the remake. We catch glimpses, files and memos. The hospital is rotten to the core and given a substantial upgrade in the canon. A rogue scientist cooking up monsters in the sewer was a great addition, but the city isn't a space to learn or conquer or consider. It's just a corridor dressed as a tragedy. The puzzles, what few there are surface level and solved in seconds. Compare the subway tracks puzzle in this game to the clock paintings in the original, and it's like comparing a fidget spinner to a Rubik's Cube. In the original, we felt Umbrella's reach, through exploration, through puzzle logic, through interlinked areas that spiraled into one another. The city felt like it belonged to them, and we were trespassing in the ruins. The park, the clock tower, the offices, all of it bore the company's fingerprints. In the remake, those connections are severed. The city is segmented, each level is a closed loop, and none of them lead back to each other. There's no sense of place, just motion, and a monster representative of them that stalks us only when the camera demands it.
I felt empty and cold as the heat from the blast washed over us. All this death wasn't caused by a monster-making virus. It was greed.
The missile hits, and Raccoon City goes up in smoke. Jill resolves to end Umbrella once and for all, joining the long line of people who resolve to end Umbrella once and for all. And somewhere beneath that rubble is the game that we didn't get to play. Raccoon City dies screaming, but the remake strips it down. It forgets that survival isn't just about health bars or monster fights, it's about choices, about time and pressure and what you do when both run out. The original game wasn't perfect, but it gave us that. It let Jill be scared, it let us feel her fear. It let the city feel like it was falling apart with us inside it. The remake is slicker, faster, prettier, but it's shallower. It trims the soul out of its themes and expects the aesthetics to fill the gap. They don't. It deserved better. Jill Valentine deserved better. Nemesis deserved better. He wasn't just a monster, he was Jill's monster, her worst nightmare given flesh. The personification of everything Umbrella took from her and Raccoon City. And in the end, he became just another QuickTime event, just another cutscene, just another sequence where we push forward on the analog stick and wait for the game to play itself. He's the yellow paint of monster design. There's no dread in that, no survival, no horror, just noise. The remake remembers the iconography, but not the intent. It quotes the story, but doesn't understand the subtext. It flashes bright, burns hot, and leaves nothing behind. Jill held Carlo's hand as the sun inched slowly up over the horizon, turning the sky magnificent shades of pink and grey and lemon yellow. When it flashed white and the sound wave hit, she didn't look back. Resident Evil 3 Remake is a dying star.
September 18th. Daylight. The monsters have taken over the city. Somehow, I'm still alive. You're out of your mind, but I'm alive. The clock ticks on down, but I'll survive. A simple look that says you're mine, you're made for me. You say that I'm your Valentine. Neon kiss